Cool. Yay. And I don't think it will affect you, but I do have a candle burning that's a wood wick. So if for any reason you start to hear like little crackly sounds and it's annoying, just tell me to blow it out and I will.
Okay. I don't anticipate that being a problem, but thank you
Perfect.
for the heads up. Julia, your cozy vibes are ruining the mood.
I'm sorry. Lest you know I have a blanket on my lap.
I know. I'm thinking of grabbing the one that I have near me because like I'm unexpectedly cold. We're at that time of like seasonal transition where it's like doesn't matter what you wear, you will be uncomfortable half the day. Like
Yes, for sure. It's like it's overcast here today, so it just looks kind of blah, but then it's like really humid, so I was like sweaty and now I'm cold and there's no happy medium.
Yeah. The only consistency is like you're gonna hate it. Like okay, I think I am gonna grab my blanket. Hold on. Julia is in fact she's even more than in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm everywhere.
Yes. You are the chat.
I am the chat. So I went to grab this because I obviously just wanted to have it on hand. And then I was like, oh, well, while I'm upstairs, let me get my old one too. So this is the copy I've had since I was 9. So yay.
Amazing.
It's in shockingly good condition.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. I mean, there's like very minor like spine crackage, but I take good care of my books, okay? They're important.
The Taylor Swift movie.
Oh, she is in it, actually. You're right. I know what you're talking about. Kara, have you not seen the movie? Also, where did you go?
I had to grab my blanket. I have not seen the movie. I had like no experience with this story at all. So
yeah, don't see the movie. Movie bad.
Okay.
But Taylor Swift is in it.
Good to know. Yeah. Let's see. Hello, welcome. I think we're probably going to give it like a couple more minutes, but we'll be starting soon.
Yeah. We can talk about whatever. I wore my red shirt on purpose because I was like, that's significant.
It sure is. I was like writing down the like questions and like quotes that I was going to like share or like pair together, and I'm like already I'm pre-emotional about it. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm always emotional when I like read this book or if I like start reading the quotes, but it's been enough weeks now since I finished the last reread that I feel like very settled, but I know I'm going to hit a point when we're in it and I'm going to be like,
Pause for your hosts to like just cry a little bit. Okay, so actually that leads us perfectly into our sort of opening thoughts. Hello, everybody. My name is Kara. My channel, of course, is Wild Book Garden, and this is part of our Not a Genre book club. Or I say our. Julia's a guest for this part. And the whole point of it is to read and discuss middle grade and young adult books with the same kind of depth and attention to detail that we tend to give to classics or other adult books. And I always say it's not that nobody does that, but I do think that broadly speaking, it is much less likely that kid lit of any kind is treated as serious literature, which it is. So my wonderful co-host is Julia. I'm going to have her introduce herself in a minute. And this is the first of our Giver series discussions. We can show off, if you can see all the tabs there, it's going to be a good one. And Julia is already linked in the description. I also have the Not a Genre book club playlist. If you want to hear a little bit more about the club and our lineup of books, Basically, it's going to be this series for the next few months. But Julia, you want to do a quick introduction on you and your channel?
Sure. My name is Julia. My channel's Shakespeare and Such. Right now, it is mainly book club content, but you know what? There are other things there that are older that you can enjoy, and who knows? Maybe eventually there will also be new videos related to current reading, but that would imply that I'm currently reading things. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here. The Giver is, if my favorite book of my life, one of certainly my favorite books of my lifetime. It's the book that I recommend to everybody. It's the book that I declare that everybody should read. So I take this duty as co-host very seriously.
Yes. Julia reporting for duty.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a great sort of introduction because I have never read this series. I didn't even know the basic story. Like, I think the only thing I knew about it is that it was a dystopian, and it was something about like memory, like holding memories. I had no other knowledge about it. I know that it's one that a lot of people either read in school or they grew up reading it themselves. So I am coming to this fresh, which is going to be very exciting. Yeah, and we kind of covered overall thoughts a little bit, but I do want to mention content warnings very quickly before we get into the majority of the discussion. So the ones I have that I think all of these will come up in discussion: grief, corporal punishment, like specifically of children, murder, and death of infant. Julia, can you think of any other big ones? I mean, sort of like general dystopianness.
Yeah.
I think those are the big ones that'll come up. So, I feel like we kind of already started with our overall thoughts. So, Julia, feel free to add to that. No, it's great. Like I said, this was my first time reading it, but I loved it. I don't read a ton of dystopian, and I didn't when I was younger either. That was just never something I really got into. And I can't imagine, like, even if I were to read more, I feel like this would still be kind of like up there for me. Yeah, I don't know where else to go with that because we're gonna get into everything. But I gave it 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. Julia and I were sort of like pre-gaming the discussion because during our reads we were sending each other some thoughts. So we're primed. We're ready to go.
Yes. Obviously also 5 stars from me too.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I can absolutely see how this, at least this book, and I imagine the whole series, I can really see how it would be a great one to reread and to return to and to like pick up on different things. And I think it's like, is my impression is that it's one of those stories that is sort of deceptively straightforward in like the overall kind of plot and also the writing style, which I have a specific question about. And so I think that maybe it's a story that not that people.
Oh no, you froze for me. No. Kara. Uh-oh. Mayday, mayday. No. No. Am I frozen for everyone else? I don't know what's going on. Oh no. Okay. It's not just me. It's not just me, Kara. No. Welcome to Julia's discussion of The Giver. No, we need Kara to come back, but I mean, I'll fill the silence. I first read The Giver when I was in 5th grade. It was this one. It didn't look like this back then. And I still, to this day, I do not know how I picked up this book because I know I didn't have to read it for school. I would never have naturally been drawn to this cover. I'm like, oh, no, give me a book with girl on cover. Who is this? I don't know him. I want to say maybe I picked it up for accelerated reader. Did anyone else have accelerated reader in their schools? So maybe that was the impetus. I don't know. But yeah, the cover, it's not good. I mean, I love it now because it's nostalgic to me, but like it's not giving. But also, The Giver was published the same year I was born, so that's how we know it's a good one. Kara, let's see. Let's get our Kara updates. Oh, she might have to do a restart. Oh, I'm already on it. She was like, would you like to talk about your history with the series a bit more? Like how you picked it up? Already on it, babe. Took me 3 seconds before I started going into my spiel. So yeah, I don't know, but it moved me. I was like, wow, what a story. And I also read the second book, Gathering Blue. I questioned for a second if I read that one first, but why would I have read that one first? I don't know. But it does have a girl on the cover, so that tracks. I have read the whole series once. So the third book, Messenger, and the fourth book, Sun. I read both of those, I think, while I was in college because I got the box set of the Giver Quartet and I had never read those two. So it'll be very interesting rereading them because I don't have as much memory or even like nostalgia or anything about those as I do with this book and with Gathering Blue. So I'm really looking forward to it. But spoiler alert, Sun is about a mother. So I think in my current day and age, I will love it. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. But yeah, I have read this book. I don't know how many times I read it as a child, but since childhood, I read it once really early in my booktube career. So again, I was probably in college. And then I reread it 1 or 2 years ago. And then I obviously just reread it again. And this was my first time annotating it, which was very exciting. And I don't normally do tabs that kind of go with the colors of the book, but I thought for this quartet, because they all have their different like core color on the cover, I just thought it would look cute. So I gave into the aesthetic. And without going into, sorry, not me immediately getting emotional because the dedication page is for all the children to whom we entrust the future. Like, Lois, why would you write that? That's so beautiful. No, I said I wasn't gonna cry yet. Yeah, this book just gets me. But I was going to say, without spoilers of like too much of the discussion, I just wanted to share some of my tab color meanings, maybe. We'll see. I have one that is just like the chef's kiss quotes, just like the ultimate, like, I can't believe you wrote that. Wow. I have one color that stands for like innocence versus wisdom, which I think is a very core theme of this book. I'm sure Kara has something related to that she will want us to talk about. Dana, and also, I'm sorry, you're like saying things and I can't highlight your quotes because I'm not the host, but I also love the dedication pages for kids' books. They're like so sweet. One of my tab colors is just, I wrote emo girl. Those are the quotes that make me cry. And then I have one that are things narratively in the story, in like the dystopia, that just like I feel like here we're talking about puberty. Like this is all a metaphor for puberty in a weird way. And sometimes like not even a metaphor, but great. Yes, also thank you for talking so I'm not alone. Kara, come back. And then I have one color that is for precision of language, which is not only, I think, something that Lois Lowry utilizes in this book, but is also just like a core component of their society in this book, and also a reoccurring thing that also makes me emotional. So there you go. I don't know where Kara is, but I guess rifle through the book for a minute. Is it riffle? I've heard people say riffle, and I'm like, it's not spelled with 2 F's. I don't know why it would be said that way, but I don't know for sure. Wow. I love this book. Sorry, I'm really excited. Sorry, it was a mistake. It was a mistake to look at the tabs. Don't cry until Kara's here to cry with you. Keep it together. Okay. We got this. Another fun fact about me and the Giver is that in elementary or middle school, I don't remember exactly when, my school, oh no, she said it's still not connecting. My school went to a staged production of The Giver. Like, I don't know who thought The Giver would make a good play or why they wanted to do that, but I love that they did because it's my favorite thing. So I was so excited. And I don't remember, she's trying a full internet reset. So stay with me. Just stay with me. We got this. We're going to ride it through the storm together. And this is very ironic too, mind you, because when we tried to get this live show started, it was my camera that just wasn't connecting. And now Kara's not here at all. Anyways, yes. So that's what I was going to talk about, Nana. Black and white clothes on and stuff. Yeah, because it was so interesting to see the way they tried to portray this like colorless society. So they had like some very creative lighting choices, and they wore black and white costumes. It was cool. Sorry, I don't mean to yawn at you. How rude. So I think I should try to convince my friends who are on local community theater boards. I should tell them, hey, opt for The Giver. Maybe I'll finally be interested in directing something because I never direct. But I did not play Taylor Swift. I witnessed the play. I was not in the play. I don't think I knew any of the people. I don't know who was doing this show. And her character's name is Rosemary. I think I'm right. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt yourself looking through. Oh, words. I just want to confirm. Oh, wait, what's the crying color? That'll clue me in. Pink. Oh, no, everything's pink. Kara!
Hello, I am so sorry, everybody.
It's okay. You're here.
Anyway,
I shared
had, like,
so many stories.
Great. I had like extra prepared notes, and my computer was like, not today. No. So anyway, let's just jump right in then.
Perfect.
And thank you, Julia, for carrying the live show during.
If there was ever a time you needed me to just ramble on, this was the time.
I know. Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna start with some theme and like big idea questions, because one of the reasons, and this fits in perfectly with why I created the book club, like one of the reasons I think this series is going to be such a good one to read for this project is there is so much depth there. And like we were talking about before my computer imploded, there's a lot of elements that seem very like straightforward in terms of the plot and even some of the writing style, but I think it really rewards closer reading. So I have a few quotes that I think are going to lead into our theme questions well. Okay, and I think this is the one, yeah, this is the one that's like part of the summary on the back of my copy. So this is big idea.
Oh, I don't have that.
Jonas frowned. I wish we had those things still, just now and then. The old man smiled. So do I, he said, but that choice is not ours. But sir, Jonas suggested, since you have so much power. The man corrected him. Honor, he said firmly. I have great honor. So will you, but you will find that that is not the same as power. So, I think a big part of the book is really summed up in that, like the distinction between honor and power, and how you can, I feel like the story really shows that you can sort of fool people into thinking they have power if you honor them enough and if you treat them well. So I wanted to talk about that distinction and where we see that in the book. Obviously, the example that the giver is talking about is like the position of the giver, but sort of other places that you see that conflict or that distinction where something might look like power or choice and it actually isn't.
That is such an intriguing question that I have not examined very much. So, this is a fun way to start. I mean, I think the immediate thing that comes to mind for me is just like the way their society functions as a whole, because the community is so regulated. You don't choose your spouse, you don't choose your own job, you don't choose what age you cut your hair, you don't choose when you learn to ride a bike. There's all these things that are mapped out, and you would think inherently, human beings, we like to have agency. You see the littlest toddlers, what are the first things that they start defying their parents about? I don't want the green cup, I want that blue cup. It's just like, I just wanted to have the choice. Okay. And yet we don't see that kind of frustration in their community. And I think that comes from, like you said, the comfort of, being cared for and, just having, you're never going hungry. You're never too cold. You're never sick. You're never hurt physically. And having all of that taken care of for them kind of enables this, I guess, what word am I looking for? They just don't mind not having options because they know everything's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no, it's almost like choice has to come from some kind of conflict or some kind of, like, to have a preference, you have to have some things that you like more than others or some things that work better than others. And so when everything is the same, it's like choice can't exist or there's no point in it because yeah, like I don't know if that's making sense.
I have a quote for this.
Do it.
I gotta find it. I don't know when the heck it falls though in this book. I tabbed too many things. Keep talking.
Okay. Yes, and another thing that I think we see that really interesting distinction of like being honored or showing honor or respect versus power is like the ceremonies that their community has for aging, even though it's not really their birthdays. And even things like the passing on of names. And that's something that like that is respectful, and I think in a different context that could have been a really beautiful show of like the power of the community, and of like recognizing individuals. But because it's in this setting, it doesn't read like that. It's jarring, when you compare that to the extremely regulated ways that they live their lives.
Yes.
And so I think it's kind of sneaky almost, like, of the sort of higher ups in the community. They create things that feel like they're more meaningful than they are. And I think that helps keep people from questioning it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Nana said it very well here. It's so utopia that it's dystopia. I think that's one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting about this book, especially, like I said, I haven't read a ton of dystopians, so I have a smaller sample size.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a really interesting one because it's not nearly as obviously dystopian as they can be, or even ones like, have you read Wrinkle in Time, Julia?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so actually, that would be a really interesting one to pair with this book. But that's a side note. In A Wrinkle in Time, there is a community that feels very similar in some ways. There's all this sameness, and you don't break rules, and everything is regulated, and like the monotony itself is like frightening. And like that version is very, like, you get to that planet and you're like, this is really creepy already. Like from the gate, it's like, don't like this. Whereas with The Giver, I feel like it is much slower, like it's more insidious because there are places where life feels almost normal. And I have a question about that later. So put in that.
Everything you're saying, I have like 4 different directions I want to like talk right now because everything you're saying is so interesting.
Change of plans. We're doing a whole week of live shows on this one book.
Deal. Yes, I think that's so true because I mean, first of all, the way you described that one as like monotony, I mean, in this book, it's literally sameness. Like that's what they call it, is like no colors, just sameness. And it's like inherently, and okay, and this is kind of, I guess, the direction I wanted to go anyway, so that works. I do think the way you described like the insidiousness of like how positive the community seems is, I think, very carefully crafted, probably like literally in their society, but also by Lois Lowry as an author, because when taken in little bits and pieces, it sounds so smart and good and well thought out. She talks about whatever age, I think it's like maybe 6, or yeah, maybe like 6 or 7, when they go from the back buttoning jackets to the front buttoning jackets, because when they're little, they're learning like interdependence, and then they grow up and they're learning independence. And it's like, those are good skills that you want people to have. And like, it's beautiful. But then it's like, okay, but wait, also like the fact that it's like, I can't choose what kind of jacket I wear. Like it's, it goes deeper than that, but it's presented and too like as a milestone and an exciting thing, but it's like, it's a jacket. Like,
it's like having these things that are by themselves, they're normal or even like healthy or positive. Having them mandated turns them into something else. And actually, let's go to the question about this now, because you segued beautifully, Julia.
Wait,
what was that?
But can I share the quote about?
Yes, choice? You found it. Yes,
I did find it. Yeah, it's a little longer than I thought. Sorry, but
that's okay.
It says Jonas is learning the colors, and he becomes very frustrated because he's not seeing them all the time. He wants, the colors permanently. And he says, it isn't fair that nothing has color. Not fair? The giver looked at Jonas curiously. Explain what you mean. Well, Jonas had to stop and think it through. If everything's the same, then there aren't any choices. I want to wake up in the morning and decide things. A blue tunic or a red one. He looked down at himself, at the colorless fabric of his clothing. But it's all the same, always. Then he laughed a little. I know it's not important what you wear. It doesn't matter, but it's the choosing that's important, isn't it? The giver asked him.
Yes.
Like I give myself goosebumps just trying to read the dang book. It's so good.
And that actually, that is one of the quotes that I had pulled for a specific discussion about the theme of choice. Yeah, it's the choosing that's important. And I think that is like what we were talking about a little at the beginning, that there is like the reason that we read these like dystopians or these like societies, like again, Wrinkle in Time is the one I'm thinking of, which is not a helpful example for you. But like the reason that we like read about these communities and we feel this like instinctive, like this is wrong and this is scary, is like even when the lack of choice is for, you know, good reasons, like because in the community nobody does go hungry and that's a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even when it's for good reasons, people not having the choice and not even knowing, like
That
they
there
can't
could
even,
be a choice.
yes, like they can't even want a choice. Like the fact that Jonas, because of his training to be the giver, is realizing like not only is there a concept of choosing, but it is sad that like our community can't even fathom that, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
like even choosing not to choose would be a choice, you know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so that's a great quote. And I'm sure we're going to get into the way that choice overlaps with all these other themes as well. But I also wanted to talk about when we're talking about these things that by themselves would be normal or healthy. And I'm sure, Julia, like, you know, you having all this training and background in child development and psychology, it's like these are things, like you said with the jacket, it is important to lean on your community. It is important to have independence, but having it done in this way, it feels wrong to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to talk about other examples of those things that are, I feel like there's a certain phrase I'm trying to think of. They're almost like to lull people
Mm-hmm.
into feeling like things are okay. And I wanted to talk about some examples of that and like what we think the purpose is. I mean, I guess besides the obvious of like lulling them, both from like a story perspective and also like Lois Lowry as the author. So we talked about the like the jacket example you gave and like the you know, ceremony, even these like things that are showing this distinction between honor and power. So I'll start with one because I don't want to like dominate the conversation here. But one of the ones that I thought was so interesting and that I kept thinking about throughout the book is the bikes.
Mm-hmm.
And how technically you're not supposed to ride them until what is it, like 7 or 8? Like that's, yeah, that's when everyone gets their bike. But like literally everybody who has an older sibling starts earlier than that. And everyone knows that. And even the teachers like joke about it. And that is one of those things that is like, it's so normal, you know? And it's like by having these small rules that everybody knows that you can break and it's fine, I think it really, it's creepy because it's so calculated, because the powers that be in this community, they know that if they give people the illusion of like freedom and these things that are meaningless, then they're not going to notice that they don't actually have it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so other examples. And
Yes.
yeah.
The first thing that immediately popped into my mind, especially like from a craft standpoint as a way to start the story, is the sharing of feelings ritual.
Yes.
Is like, one, it feels so normal for people who have kind of like a nuclear little like family unit, like to like, how was your day? Can you share a good thing, share a bad thing that happened to you at school today? Like, I feel like a lot of people have families that kind of do that sort of thing anyways. So it starts the book for us as a reader being like, yeah, family, mom, dad, brother, sister, how was your day? This is also normal. But then you start to understand more. It's like, this is a mandatory ritual. You can't lie. You can't say, pass, or like nothing happened. It's like, no, how did you feel today? Like, you have to tell us.
Yeah, like there's no privacy allowed. And also it's like even the conversations with Jonah's parents when they're like working through the emotions, it's like this should be like a really healthy thing.
Yeah.
And in moderation, or like if it was handled differently, it would be. But I think one of the things that I felt with those scenes is that it waters down everything, because like when they're talking about the concept of love and Jonah asks about it and they're like, well, you could say, I enjoy you, I am proud of you, I appreciate you, but do you see how love is not a precise word? That's not, like he asks if his parents love him and they're basically like, not applicable. Like,
yeah, straight up.
Yeah, and like that is something where I think one of the things that both in story and also like Lois Lowry as an author, those emotional sharing scenes, one of the things that they do is they show how you can water down like a person if you water down their language enough. Which precision of language is a big thing in this book that you had mentioned when we were reading it. So I definitely have a question about that. But yeah, the whole processing feelings is a great example of something where I'm like, this should be really healthy, but I'm so uncomfortable right now.
Well, and it's so interesting because I think it's the one in the opening scene. But the story that Lily tells about, like, there was a boy from another community and he cut in line and it made me so angry, like,
yeah.
And I think the way they talk it out is so well done, like, and makes total sense to be like, well, don't you think he felt strange and stupid in this place he's never been? Maybe he didn't know the rules. And it does like kind of reshape Lily's perspective. And it's like, yeah, good. Like that seems so great. But then as you follow Jonas through his story, then you have this entirely new lens of like, that was not like anger. Like you barely can understand what anger is because your life is so diluted. It's like you had like irritation at best.
Yeah. And especially with that example you brought up, it's like, it sounds like empathy, it sounds like it's a good thing for the parents to be like, well, think about how he felt. It's like you are doing the right thing for horrible reasons. And it is such an interesting choice for how to tell this story. Nana compared it to Botox. Like, sure, it's a choice, but you've been told your whole life that aging is ugly. So is it really a choice? Yes. Like I feel like that about like plastic surgery in general. It's something where like, people getting obviously to choose what operations they're going to have or what, is going to happen to their body. But how much of a choice is it when it's because it's like girls who are told their whole life that when they turn 18, they get to have a nose job. It's like, is that a choice? It feels different. Hello, Zev. Welcome. Yes. We being fans of the book.
One of us.
Yeah. At the very beginning, before I had a technical difficulty, we were talking about how Julia has reread this series multiple times, and I am like a newcomer. This is the first time I have experienced the story at all. So I am thrilled to be here. Okay. So just sort of, I feel like my questions are just sort of morphing into each other. So we're just going to go with that. Let's talk about that precise language idea because that comes up a lot. And one of I think it was literally the first tab that I put in my book.
It might be mine too.
Yeah. Is when Asher is late to class and the instructor says, I accept your apology, Asher, the instructor said. He was smiling. And I thank you because once again you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language. Distraught is too strong an adjective to describe salmon viewing. He turned and wrote distraught on the instructional board. Beside it, he wrote distracted because Asher had said he got distraught watching the salmon. And this is like an example of like, this book is actually very subtle. And I think maybe people might not think of it like that because the language is fairly straightforward. But page 5, you have this scene about somebody telling another person, you can't use that word because it's too emotional for what you're describing. Which, first of all, you can't tell somebody how to feel about, it's like you didn't experience that. You don't get to tell somebody what their feelings were about it. But also, I think that is such a smart way to set up the problems with this society. Is the one of the problems is that they think that emotions are too strong and too dangerous, and so they get rid of them, or they try. Like, I just, the word distraught is already such an emotionally charged word, and also poor Asher, because it's like, of course it would be him that this happens to.
Baby boy.
It's like, everything like layered on top of that is like, it's such a good line. It's such a good scene. Like, I love it. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, perfectly in line with everything you just said, in that it's related to precision of language, and it was my first tab of the book, but also then the layer of like how that links to the community, to the craft of the actual novel. The literal opening line of this book is, "It was almost December and Jonas was beginning to be frightened." No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. And then it goes on and on and on. But then wherever we get it at the end of the little section, apprehensive, Jonas decided. That's what I am. Like, I mean, she literally started us off there.
Yeah.
Lois. Oh. Yeah. A lot of feelings. That was one of my whole tab colors, was precision of language related things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Zev says, do you think the way words in our world, ones like awesome or the best or my favorite, creates the opposite effect in which we can't differentiate big emotions from the small? Hyperbolic phrasing is also imprecise language because it turns everything into a larger deal than maybe they ought to be. I think that's a really good comparison and really like interesting to think about, because it is sort of like the opposite problem. And it's almost like, I don't know, in a weird way, it's almost like Jonas in this book, he's like fighting for the right to be hyperbolic. Like, you know, it's like humans exaggerate. But it's like they exaggerate in ways that are meaningful. And there's like a kind of emotional honesty that comes from being able to use these big words, even if you know technically they're not the same thing. But I do think that in our current world, I think the desensitizing is from the opposite problem. I feel like you can also change the meaning with words by using them for smaller things, and then the word for its usage fades. Yes.
I think awesome is the perfect example of that, because, you know, obviously we have like the root word of awe, which is like wonder, spectacle. It could be for better or for worse, but it's an objectively like positive word now. But I feel like, like as soon as we started describing something that's like cool as something awesome, it took all of the actual awe out of it, because it, you know, you would used to see it in like headlines of like accidents and like, you know, big things happening, and now it's just like, that skateboard trick was awesome, dude.
Yeah, or even like the whole precision of language thing. It's like, I think
we need to bring back Nito. Sorry.
We need to bring back Nito. Yeah. Agreed. I think one of the things about the imprecise language discussion as well is like the value of having words that are not precise, or that can mean different things, or that can kind of be in that, like, while you were talking, Julia, one of the examples that made me think of was the word terrible, and how for a long time that was something that could be good or bad, and like it specifically conveyed this feeling of like, this is such a massive like emotional experience or some kind of reaction that it's like you almost don't know if it's good or bad because it's so overwhelming, and now it only means bad, pretty much. Like unless you're like maybe reading like an older work or something, or if you're talking to somebody and you used it and you very specifically said how you meant it, like it's just, I think one of the beautiful things about language is how messy it is. And in the world of the giver, things are not allowed to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
true.
know.
Yeah, we have the scene too where I think it's Jonas and his father. I can't remember who now. Where it's like the classic, like, I'm so hungry, I'm starving. And he's like,
Yes.
no, you have not been starving. You will never be starving. You don't know what starvation is, which is more of like a real world sort of like, I feel like people have
Yes.
had conversations like that with their own parent in
Yes.
modern day, you know, but it was like immediately like, nope, wrong word. You can't even think to say it like that.
Yeah. And actually, I'm really glad you mentioned that example, because one of the things, I think I must have tabbed it, but I don't know where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But like when it's Jonas is thinking about that like memory of like saying he's starving and being told like no.
Mm-hmm.
Um the thing that also struck me about it is like when he's being corrected, they say, you are not starving, you have never been starving, you've never been starving. I think they say no one has ever been starving.
Yeah.
Which is a lie. That is a massive lie. And I think that is so interesting to include, because it kind of turns that conversation from, like we were saying, like that is an important distinction to make. And I think it's important to keep things in perspective about, some of the other. You found it? Do you want
Yeah,
to read it?
sure. Let me make sure it's who. Wait, I'm trying to see who was it actually. Oh, I guess it was Jonas, but it was at school. Um, Once, when he had been a 4, he had said just prior to the midday meal at school, "I'm starving." Immediately, he had been taken aside for a brief private lesson in language precision. He was not starving, it was pointed out. He was hungry. No one in the community was starving, had ever been starving, would ever be starving. To say starving was to speak a lie, an unintentional lie, of course, but the reason for precision of language was to ensure that the unintentional lies were never uttered.
Yeah. So, okay. So I misremembered. They don't say nobody has ever been starving, but they say in the community, which is still pretty vague
Which
because
that feels like an unintentional lie because it's like a lie by omission. It's like no one's ever been starving here in this community since we started it.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like having those kinds of qualifiers, it turns this discussion from being like, yes, this is a valid thing to talk about and a good way to teach kids that like other people, like, not that you can't suffer because other people have it worse, but it is good to have perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
it turns the conversation from that into like another way of ignoring things that are difficult, whether or not, because like it's true that nobody in the community is starving
Mm-hmm.
anymore, but to act like that's all that matters, it's like by not acknowledging that this hasn't always been true, that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like erasing the past for any reason is not a good thing. um Let's see. Oh, yeah. Name said saying literally when you mean figuratively to exaggerate, the word has completely lost its meaning. And it's so frustrating because that word is so useful for an autistic. Yeah. Like I feel like the literally and figuratively is one where it's like I fully acknowledge language changes, and I don't want to be one of those grumpy old people that's like, back in my day, this word. But that is one of the examples where I'm like, I think it's important that we keep the word literally, because I think it does have value. Like when you're like, even when we talk about in some of our discussions, it's like, I was thinking of like 100 Years of Solitude. It's like, literally, I felt sick reading this, and it's like, that's an important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Zev says that's the thing about categorizing things, even definitions. The things we use to categorize things like continents and peoples, it still ends up being imprecise, and there's so much more wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So, any other thoughts or examples on this, like, kind of discussion of like normal things or healthy things? feel like we covered a lot of the big ones. Even just like things like the general sort of tone of the interactions between the characters, like they tease each other, you know, and they have friends and like they have good relationships with their family. And those are not bad things, but because of how structured everything is with the community, it's kind of like anything, any little good thing that they have is still a tool, you know, and it's still deliberate, and it's not something that they get to choose for themselves.
Yeah, I would agree, because like, yes, they have relationships, you know, they form friendships as children that may or may not last into adulthood, but and they have families, but then, you know, you take a step back and you remember, okay, well, this person is married to someone who was chosen for them based on compatibility. It wasn't like someone that they were like, wow, I would love to spend the rest of my life with this person. And yeah, that couple has children, but they were children that were just randomly assigned to them because they signed a paper that said, we'd like to have a child in our house. So it kind of paints those relationships and those interactions in a different light when you remember it's like, this is all just kind of circumstantial in a way.
Yeah, it's so mechanical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of like colorless is a great like metaphorical description and also literal.
It's the precision of language again.
Precision of language. The elephant comfort object. Okay, even it's like the clinical language. It's like the comfort
object.
Instead of,
Can't
like,
even be a stuffed animal.
Yeah, it's like that's too touchy-feely. It is a comfort object. You are a child object who needs their comfort object, and at the age of whatever, you must leave it behind you. Yeah, and it's like it's almost like a funny description. Or it is funny, but in the context of the wider story, it's like, ooh, this is like, because also when we're talking about like the mechanical and clinical language, when you are clinical with words, you become clinical with people. And I think that is one of, like, with everything that we find out about the release, which is, you know, such a euphemism, and the way that that the higher ups straight up lie about that, and they conceal everything about what actually happens, and we see that, I mean, the part when Jonah's dad does that to one of the babies, and Jonah is like horrified and he's angry and he's grieving, and he's saying to the giver, like, how can my dad do that? Like, I think of him as a good person. And the giver is like, well, he doesn't know any better. And I think, like, that's such an interesting thing to say, because on the one hand, it's like people are still responsible for their actions. And like, we see that even from the beginning of the story, before Jonah is chosen as the giver, there are parts of him that like recognizes that something about this isn't right, which is why he gets picked as the giver or the receiver. But sorry, I just saw this comment. It's giving away lots of this Chili's. Yeah. Sorry, that's a great comment. Where was I? Sorry, I got distracted by the
dad not knowing any better. We changed tone very quickly.
Yeah, okay. The dad not knowing any better. On the one hand, you are responsible for actions and decisions that you make. But on the other hand, if you raise somebody to use words that don't connect to emotions, if you raise somebody to view other people as like robots, you know, in your interactions is like mechanical, if everything is determined for you, if you're not taught that there is value in things that are not perfect or not like easy to explain, it's like I can see how that would happen. Like I think one of the reasons maybe that the community is so fixated on the precision of language is because if you tightly control somebody's vocabulary, it makes it easier to control who they are as like a person and like not questioning things. And like obviously people can experience without having specific words for it. Like I feel like one of the examples I always like think about is it's not like, when women were fighting for the right to vote in the US, it's not like they woke up one day and they're like, wait a second, I think I'm a person. It's like just having the word feminism, it doesn't mean that like all of a sudden this started happening. But when you have language to describe things, like Nina was talking about being autistic, it's like when you have language to describe your experiences or to describe something important about you, that matters a lot. And so like by tightly controlling things like language, they can control so much else. Like even to the point of like turning somebody who might have been a good person, like Jonah's dad, into a murderer,
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, in a literal sense, it is censorship, right? It's like you're not enabling people to say certain things because, oh no, actually we don't think that's the most accurate way to say it, and so you just can't use that word, or you can't describe it that way because you're wrong. Yeah. So that's like, I think, a big part of the control of the community as well. Yeah. And I agree with you were saying with what you were saying too about Jonas's dad, because when you have an environment where you're describing things in terms of the logic of them versus the morality of them, it like forces them to like not even examine other possibilities, because they're saying like, well, to keep the community running smoothly, we can't have two identical people. That would be confusing. So naturally, whichever one is ready to thrive is the one we're keeping around. And like, that's it. And it's not a matter of discussion. So it's like so dark and heavy, but I don't even think it's like a factor for him to even consider like what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like he doesn't have, he was very deliberately kept from having like a capacity to think about ethics. It's just like, it's not about what is the right thing to do. It's like, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. And also while you were describing that scene specifically, it just kind of made this connection for me of like, I mean, the twin thing is a great example of like that is straight up eugenics, is like filtering out people, and even the way that they like intentionally breed people is like, that I should put that in content warnings as well, because that is very, like, there are some examples like the twin thing where it is very obvious, but even just the whole way that the society operates and how they decide who's going to be like the birth mothers and everything, it's in more subtle ways as well. But it's like the connection that I sort of had when you were talking about that is like the eugenics of like reality. It's connected to almost like eugenics of language, it's like the weeding out of like words that we decide don't serve us, or like words that are too like emotional or too big. And I just keep going back to that Salmon quote because like that left such an impression on me, is like the word distraught, like we have to be distraught about other people. That is the whole point. And I think that is one of the things we see when Jonah gets these horrible memories from the giver, is it's not that we're like saying those are good things or that people need to suffer a certain amount to be a good person. It's like we need to have the capacity to be distraught. And I think that's one of the things that the community is very deliberately removing from people.
I think that's so accurate the way you're saying that, because it's like I feel like even if there is a situation in their community where like Jonas describes didn't he like slam his hand in the door or something at one point, he like tells about, and I'm sure it was so clinical the way his parents went to the speaker and were like, we need relief of pain. Like it wasn't like, oh, Jonas, are you okay? The way we would want a human interaction to be, showing, empathy and caring about one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like another good example of how like everything in the story, like all of these scenes and all of these little examples and things that Jonah remembers, they're also intentionally given by Lois Lowry. Like it's funny because like in a lot of ways we're like critiquing the whole precision of language thing, but the book itself
it's like perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Very precise language. Zeb's Cozy's Place said, speaking of autism, another children's book helped me figure out I was on the spectrum. Mockingbird by Catherine Erskine. I was the last one to find out my diagnosis. But yeah, like stories, that's like a great point to bring up as well. Like the stories do that. And I feel like, I mean, The Giver sort of even touches on that with, the discussion of lying comes up a lot.
Yes.
And discussion of memory. And obviously these memories that Jonas is receiving, they're 100% factually accurate, which is not usually how memory works in the real world. But so it's like these are like true things, but we also sort of see with the discussion of language, there's sort of this implicit value that Jonas is using to place on telling stories. I don't know if that makes sense, if you would agree with that.
I would. I don't have anything to add, but I would agree.
You're like, I'll allow it.
Carry on.
Okay, so I think we covered, I think there's one more sort of big theme question and then a little bit about characters. Totally going to tell my mom that everyone finds their decision very funny, because you're right, and they should feel like clowns. Just a little bit, because I love them. Okay, so one of the other quote things, and I must have forgotten to tab this even after we talked about it, which I need to fix that. But this is when Jonah, do I keep saying Jonah?
It's
Jonas. Sorry, I don't know why I'm doing that.
Well, I think what happened was once you made it possessive, but it still sounded like Jonas. And so then Jonas morphed into Jonah. Now I can't talk. So.
I need to be precise with my language.
Excuse me. Precision of language, miss.
Yeah. Jonas is like looking at the rules for his training to be the next receiver of memory.
Yep.
And he gets to the end and it says, "You may lie." And he has like a little emotional breakdown about it, understandably.
A little 10-year crisis or 12-year crisis.
Poor baby. Yeah. Oh, and this is the part too where it gets into the starving example. Yeah. Okay. So the part that I wanted to share is like after he has this little memory of like the starving thing, to say starving was to speak a lie, an unintentional lie, of course, but the reason for precision of language was to ensure that unintentional lies were never uttered. Did he understand that? They asked him, and he had. He had never, within his memory, been tempted to lie. Asher did not lie. Lily did not lie. His parents did not lie. No one did. Unless, now Jonas had a thought that he had never had before. This new thought was frightening. What if others, adults, had, upon becoming 12s, received in their instructions the same terrifying sentence? What if they had all been instructed, "You may lie"? His mind reeled. Now empowered to ask questions of utmost rudeness and promised answers, he could, conceivably, though it was almost unimaginable, ask someone, some adult, his father perhaps, "Do you lie?" But he would have no way of knowing if the answer he received were true.
Lois.
Lois. Yeah, like that is such a good passage. Like I don't even, there's a lot to unpack here, and I mean that in the best way. Because it's not just like Jonas kind of he's like, I don't even think about the concept of lying because it's so anathema to our community. But also the realization that he will never know if anybody else got the same thing. And just like, we don't even know if it's true. We don't find out in the book if other adults got that, although I guess it's implied with some of the jobs they have. But it's like,
I guess, yeah.
Just raising that possibility, Jonas, for the first time, is realizing that he has no way, like it's kind of like he's alone, because he's been given all this freedom to ask things, but he's like, it's meaningless because I don't know if that's really the truth. All I have is if I trust these people, and I have now been told that basically I shouldn't trust these people. Like, it's just it's a lot.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, following up with that too, the first time that Jonas lies is in that scene where he asks his parents, "Do you love me?" And they're like, "Well, do we enjoy you? Do you understand why love is an inappropriate word to use?" And he just concedes and says, "Yes, I understand." But he's like, "No, that memory felt so important and so real that like I can't even understand why you would try to convince me otherwise."
Yeah.
This book.
Just having a little moment here.
I know. It's
yeah.
and also, well, no, it's too random, but we haven't spoken at all about Gabriel yet. So
oh yeah.
We're talking about Gabriel.
Do we want to let's do the character questions and then sort of the last couple of because I have one question where I'm like, this is one of those classic, like the worst essay question to get in an exam, because it's like a multi-part, it's like, what does the book say about, and then it's like this list of things. So I'm the worst teacher right now. But yes, let's talk about characters. We talked quite a bit about Jonas, but I love that boy.
He's a special, important boy, and I love him.
I love him so much, and he's just...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's like there's something from the moment, like literally I'm already crying. There's something from the moment at the ceremony when they're trying to describe why they chose him for the receiver of memory. And they say he has the capacity for wisdom that is like so beautiful to me every time. And I'm like, he does. He has it. Yeah.
It's like all of his reactions are so understandable and they feel so real. And every time he gets like the parts where the giver gives him like the really hard memories of like war and like all kinds of like suffering, and Jonas is so angry and he's like, why do people do that? Like, why can't everybody feel like this? And I'm like, it's like the like heartbreak of realizing that you can't force somebody to care about other people. And Jonas having to realize that, and in his case, it's like not only can you not force somebody to care, it's like you can't even like make them understand like the concept of caring.
The one that gets me, I say the one as if I don't cry 83 times while reading this 200-page book. I always get really emotional at the scene where they've been given their job assignments and Asher is now like the little recreational whatever assistant guy, and the children are playing war, and Jonas gets so upset, and it's literally in the quote where he's like, I need to make them understand, but I need to be kind about it. Like he's so genuinely trying to explain, like, you guys shouldn't be playing this. That's game. It's not. And just his realization of like, I can't even make them even begin to understand why this is upsetting to me is like, it's a lot.
Yeah. And I feel like, see, this is, everything is like so interconnected in this book,
I
because
know.
it like overlaps with like the whole precision of language idea.
Mm-hmm.
It overlaps with just, I mean, the whole big concept of empathy and like
Where's
caring
the
about
quote?
yeah.
Talking.
And also just like the position of being the receiver of memory. But it's like all of those things, it's like also highlights, I don't even know how to like say it. It's like it highlights how not only do we need like meaningful interactions with other people, obviously, but it's like having like Jonas having the care of Gabriel himself and feeling personally responsible for him is such an important part of him realizing like his like what like his conscience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you have to be exposed to other people and to, I don't know, like I can't think how to say it, but it's like there was some connection that just like as we were talking about that scene with War, it's like Jonas wants to give everybody the experience that he's had with these memories, because he's like, if you felt this, you wouldn't say the things you say and you wouldn't do the things you do. And there's just like that resonates with the idea of like needing to have stories and needing to have memories.
Yeah.
And you can't just have one person hold those, because like the point of like memories, one of them is like informing how you do things better, like in the present and the future. And so by denying that, yeah, I don't know, I'm like getting lost in what I'm trying to say, but
No, I follow what you're saying. And I don't even know where I was going to go fully, but you almost said it verbatim just naturally, so I had to go find the quote where Jonas is really frustrated and he just wants to like leave the community high and dry and be like, well, screw them, because they don't like, why do we need to care about them? They don't care about anything. And then the giver gives him the look, right? And Jonas hung his head. Of course they needed to care. It was the meaning of everything. And it's like the whole book is like right there in that the stupid 2 sentences that make me cry.
literally one of my notes is just, you have to care, like yeah. Yeah, and actually this might be near the same part, but one of the quotes I was going to share as like part of my really obnoxious question coming up is it's about that memory with like the fireplace and like, you know, everybody being together and everything. This is so hard because it's like the entire 2 pages is essentially a great quote, but
read the whole 2 pages. I'm ready. I'm already crying. Keep it coming.
Okay. Jonas blurted out what he was feeling. I was thinking that, well, I can see that it wasn't a very practical way to live, with the old right there in the same place, where maybe they wouldn't be well taken care of the way they are now, and that we have a better arranged way of doing things. But anyway, I was feeling, actually, that it was kind of nice then, and that I wish we could be that way, and that you could be my grandparent. The family in the memory seemed a little more, he faltered, not able to find the word he wanted. A little more complete, the giver suggested. Jonas nodded. I liked the feeling of love, he confessed. He glanced nervously at the speaker on the wall, reassuring himself that no one was listening. I wish we still had that, he whispered. Of course, he added quickly, I do understand that it wouldn't work very well, and that it's much better to be organized the way we are now. I can see that it was a dangerous way to live. What do you mean? Jonas hesitated. He wasn't certain, really, what he had meant. He could feel that there was risk involved, though he wasn't sure how. Well, he said finally, grasping for an explanation, they had fire right there in that room. There was a fire burning in the fireplace, and there were candles on a table. I can certainly see why those things were outlawed. Still, he said slowly, almost to himself, I did like the light they made, and the warmth.
Yeah.
Like, just the idea of like love is risk, and like caring about, like, because Jonas knows that now, that by opening himself to the possibility of caring, that he's going to be hurting for the rest of his life because he can't like unlearn that.
Yeah.
And just like that image. And I forgot this was in that quote, so I'm like in the middle of reading it, and he's like, I want you to be my grandparent, and I'm like, oh my god, no.
I know. And the fact that like that relationship that he has with the giver is like more real than anything he could ever have with like his parents or his schoolmates or whatever, because there's actual like human emotion that they both share. I know. Look at us go.
And we did promise people we'd be crying on camera, and we have to.
And I lost my marbles in the middle of you reading that, because I think I tabbed it as a moment like where I cry. But I was like, great, I need to add another tab, because there's literally a sneaky precision of language moment in the middle of that where Jonas goes, I was thinking, no, actually, I was feeling. Why would she write this? Lois! Oh, man.
And I feel like one of the reasons that there are so many like emotional impact moments is because, like, again, I keep coming back to like the writing and the language thing, because I feel like that is one of the most common ways that I see people underestimate like middle grade or young adult books, is because it doesn't have this very specific kind of like descriptive and like flowery kind of language that can be associated with like, you know, serious adult books. And I think The Giver is such a good example of how good writing, for one thing, there's a lot of different ways to have good writing, but also sometimes the best writing style for a story is pared down, because it's like having these incredibly emotional moments and having all of these word choices be so intentional. Like, that is a huge reason of why the story works so well. You know, even the whole idea of like the clinical language, to have the book written in a way that sort of like highlights that or mimics it sometimes, like also to come back to my boy Asher.
Oh, don't do it.
It makes the moments where we do use really strong words like distraught, it makes those mean so much more.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll say about Asher before we move on is one of the things that I love is that even though Jonas has obviously been chosen specifically to be the next receiver, like for a lot of good reasons, that, you know, the capacity for wisdom. And I love the idea of like the capacity for wisdom being sort of linked with the capacity for empathy. Love that. So like we know that there are reasons why clearly Jonas is going to would make a good receiver. But I like that we get these glimpses of humanity from other characters as well, because I think that intensifies the feeling of like grieving almost for these characters who don't know what they're missing. Like with Asher and with Fiona, like we barely see her, but
I like her so much.
Yeah,
and she's like hardly a character.
She is. And even with Lily, where it's like, you know, Jonas is not close with her because they're not really allowed to be, but we have these moments of them like teasing each other and like acting like siblings. And like I really love when stories can make it make sense why a certain character is the one that these things are happening to, without making it sound like nobody else matters, or, you know, it's like sort of the opposite, I guess, of a chosen one story. Because it's like the whole point is that everybody matters. It's the meaning of everything. Like,
and it makes so much sense in the regard that the whole concept for the community and how it's run, right, is like that equality, that making sure that everybody's cared for, and that whole sameness thing, which again, they're doing with good intent. You know, they want everyone to be equally looked after and equally safe and equally boring. But but regardless, we still see those little glimpses in their interactions of like, this is like, these people are kind, they're good to one another, they're polite, they, ask, how was your day? And they say, excuse me, if they bump into you. Like they're good people, but you can see in Jonas already from the beginning of the story, like just an extra level of like just caring about people. And I think like that's what makes him so the reason why I really love him as a character is like you can just see in the little ways that he interacts with like his friends and loved ones, like how much they matter to him.
Like he's sort of primed for the experience of learning empathy in a way that maybe other characters aren't. And the way I am kind of viewing it is it's like everybody has the potential for that, and some people are maybe further along that than others. And I think, one of the reasons, if not the main reason, that Jonas becomes the next receiver is that he's starting out with like a lead basically on the whole emotional intelligence thing. He's a special little boy. Speaking of special little boys, do you want to talk about Gabriel?
If I can, we'll see. But I think that does tie in, like that's sort of where my brain is going with that thought of like yes, everyone in Jonas's family obviously enjoys Gabriel. They like looking after him. They all help take care of him, and that is great. But his father, it's literally his job. So yes, he will be silly and he'll tickle him and he'll sing him little songs and do the things that people do with babies. But he's here with the intent of like, I need to make sure this child can sleep through the night and be a practical human being to have around in our community, that he won't be an inconvenience to people, because otherwise he can't be in our community. Literally, right?
He will be removed.
So it's like that aspect for him versus, and Lily, she's just a kid. So it's like, oh, teehee, cute baby. But like with Jonas, you can actually see, of course, especially as the story goes along and he learns more about love and family, and seeing the similarities that Gabriel shares with him also. Like he genuinely is like, I need to look out for this guy. I gotta help him. Like there's no one else who can do what I'm gonna do. So it needs to be done.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I was like trying to get at earlier when I'm like struggling to connect the like precision of language and like stories matter and individual interactions matter and all of that, I think that's like summed up in the fact that the thing that pushes Jonas, like, I have to get out of here now, is saving Gabriel. And like, I think that's obviously such an important plot point, like story detail to have, is like that all of this had been building. And I think, Jonas is making plans with the giver about like how to get out of there anyway. And there could have been a myriad other things that could have tipped him over the edge. But the fact that what ends up pushing him is that he has to protect Gabriel, who he has like taken kind of, that he's been giving him these memories all along, and that yeah.
Uh-oh. Here she goes again. Yeah. There's something, and this again goes back to like the caring and the empathy, the giving and receiving of memories in this book. Don't even talk to me about how she writes those scenes. I will constantly cry. I'm veering away from Gabriel, but yeah, like for Jonas to even realize that Gabriel's capable of receiving memories is because his thought is like, I'm trying to soothe this baby who is upset and can't sleep and can't soothe himself. Like, what is peaceful? What is relaxing? And he like that because trying to summon that for this little guy who doesn't know how to do it on his own. And the fact that he and the giver have that same dynamic where he sees the giver having a hard time, and he's like, give me a painful memory, give me something that I can take off your load.
Yeah.
Or when he says he doesn't want his favorite memory. I can't handle it. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And then the giver was like, it would be
I actually just saw this like quote today, and I don't know who it was quoting. I'd have to look it up. Or maybe it's just like a proverb or something, but it's like it was saying how joy shared is doubled, sorrow shared is halved.
Yeah.
And like that's one of the things that like we see in this book about like why like you can't have just one person who has like holds all of the pain for all of humanity. Like it's not even just the community, it's like everything.
The history of the whole world before the community.
And like they have lost stuff along the way because of, you know, receivers not making it. But just like the weight of that. And I think also this might be sort of a tangent, but like I was just thinking about the yeah, those scenes where Jonas is like, you know, give me something hard so that I can carry it for you, and about like war and like just all these horrible kinds of like suffering. And not only like would those things be horrible by themselves, but Jonas hasn't really experienced any kind of hardship up to this point. So it's like 0 to 3,000. Like he does not have that capacity, and he's a 10-year-old kid, you know, or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things, sorry, I'm like getting distracted by my own feelings.
Precisely, yes.
Where was I going with this? I had a point. We were talking about the war scenes. Oh, okay. So I think it can be like it's not one of my favorite platitudes, let's say, when people are like, oh, like the bad times make us appreciate the good times. Like I understand what they're getting at, but I don't like that way of phrasing it, because it suggests it's kind of like the whole like, oh, you have to suffer in order to make good art, which I don't think is true. It's like this romanticizing of pain almost. And I feel like The Giver, like the story, doesn't do that. Like the point it's making is not that, oh, there's something beautiful about humanity's capacity to hurt, you know. It's like the point it's making is that we have to remember these things because that's how we stop them from happening again. And also that there is just like inherent meaning in memory and in acknowledging that bad things happened. And yeah, like I don't know how to explain why it feels different to put it that way, but it does. It does.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, because I think that even that's like what that encompasses the whole mission that Jonas and the Giver have is, you know, it's not that they're like, well, we want everyone to go back to suffering. The sameness stuff is too safe. Like that's not their issue. What they're trying to do is say like, hey, everyone, wake up, understand what things have happened in the world, care about one another, like understand all these big feelings and their depth, and have love. And like we don't want you to be in danger, but we want you to have understanding that there could be danger and you're not in it, you know, like just and you can be properly grateful for this safe life you have because you know how it used to be.
Yeah. And also like that line again, the one where I just like read 2 pages to everyone. With the like memory of like love and family and the fireplace and everything. That where he's like Jonas is like he could see that there was risk there, that there was danger. And I think like that's one of the things that the book is getting at, that does connect pain with like meaningful life, is it's not saying you need pain, but it's saying that like because there are bad things that happen when you love someone, or when you care about someone, or when you just have even basic empathy for somebody that you don't even know, those things mean that you can be hurt or you will be hurt. But you have to care. You know, that's the meaning of everything, as Jonas says. And It's just so beautiful. Also, this ties in beautifully with the one that me and Hannah discussed last time, which was Frances Harding's newest book.
Good old Frances.
Yeah, you are gonna love it. I think it's what is it? Island of Whispers, I think is the name of it.
Make sure,
and it's very short,
reads.
and it deals a lot with grief and with like the pain of loving, because it like opens you up to grief, and also specifically the grief of losing somebody where you thought that you would have more time. And how it's like it can hurt to lose somebody that you're not even that close to because you're mourning that you could have been close. So anyway, I was just thinking about that story as we were talking about this one, and the whole like love is risk, you know. Yeah. So
I looked down and I just got like really pissed off because I was like, yeah, look at that beautiful Newbery medal, you know, like that it so well deserves. And then I was like, and yet it tries to get banned by stupid people. It's literally like you could not understand the book less if you want it to be banned. So
exactly.
It's wild.
Well, and the like limiting what kids can learn in schools, because it's like we don't want anyone to feel bad or unhappy, and I'm like,
that seems really dangerous, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So I'm like looking at my little notes here.
I know. Well, I'm just thinking about the introduction when she's like, people write to me and tell me they named their son Gabriel after this book. And I'm like, I'd literally like, I would lose it. I'd be done. I'd be like, sorry, can't do anything today. I have to cry.
Yeah.
Clear my schedule.
Yeah. I can't even imagine reading this book like close to when it first came out and like reading that ending and being like, did Jonas and Gabriel survive or did they die of hypothermia? Who can say? Like,
and then so
when she wrote books later, it was like confirmed, like they made it. It's all good. And I'm like, cool, because like I could not, like I can't even picture how upsetting it would be not knowing that, because I have the benefit of like when I was reading about like the book and the reception, that she had like Lois Lowry had even like outright answered a question like, oh yeah, they made it, and because she was already working on future books. So I'm like, sweet, I love that. I love having that knowledge.
Well, and how absolutely like mega mind of her though to give this whole book about like precision of language and like the rigidity of this whole community, and then be like, oh, they're leaving the community? I don't know. You figure it out. I'm not telling you anything else. Lois.
Yeah. Like the number of times that I have read an ending where it's like they're like they see like the warmth in the distance, and I'm like, is this hypothermia or did they make it? Lois.
Lois.
Okay, so I think the only thing that we haven't officially talked about is my obnoxious question.
Oh boy.
So let's end with that. And if we have any other character things that we want to see, I guess we sort of didn't talk about the giver specifically. So we can do that after my annoying one as a treat. Yeah.
Good, so I can cry again. Perfect.
Yeah. So this is like a very all-encompassing question. So what does the book say about, and then I just have like these lists, like a list of like concepts, because we talked a lot about like what does the book say about love, but also like suffering and joy. We talked a little bit about that, but we didn't talk as much about what does the book say about memory itself, because like one of the things that I wrote on one of the sticky notes I was using, and I'll have to find where it was because I don't know what made me write it there. I like suddenly had this thought and I was like, I must put this down where it happened.
Right here.
Let's see. Okay, I think this is it. Oh, okay. So again, I'm like, this whole thing is a good quote. the whole book is just
the whole book. This is a good quote. Have you read this? This is a good quote from Lois Lowry.
Yeah. Okay, so he's talking about how, like, in the past, everybody had access to the memories. Mm-hmm. And then they made the first receiver, certainly made them aware of how they need a receiver to contain all that pain and knowledge. But you have to suffer like that all the time, Jonas pointed out. The giver nodded. And you will. It's my life. It will be yours. Jonas thought about it, about what it would be like for him, along with walking and eating, and he looked around the walls of books. Reading? That's it? The giver shook his head. Those are simply the things that I do. My life is here. In this room? The giver shook his head. He put his hands to his own face, to his chest. No, here in my being, where the memories are. And so the thing that I had written down is life memory or action? And because, like, the giver's memories that he has, most of them are not his, but that is a hugely important part of who he is. Like, I don't even know how to ask this question. Like,
no, it's like so all encompassing. I'm like, where do we start with this concept even?
I know. Yeah, because, like, the idea of, like, who you are or what your life is, being, like, it is, I guess the answer would be that it's not like a strict dichotomy like that, but it's like Jonas is kind of thinking of it as like, well, your life is the things that you do. And the giver says, well, no, it's the things that I think and feel, especially feel. And I guess they're kind of both right. Like, I don't know. I thought that was incredibly interesting. So
yeah.
What is the book saying about memory?
Right. Because it kind of gives the vibe of like, who am I? Am I this physical being, or am I like this soul within this body?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like my memories are an important part of who I am. And I would be a different person without those specific memories to shape me and carry them around on a day-to-day. Yeah. But also, you know, I am the things that I do too. I am a teacher. I am a daughter. I am a friend. I am a performer, right? Like, so like all these things that kind of color and shape your life and who you are as a person.
And it's interesting because when you were giving those examples, it highlighted for me that, like, the things that you do, those tend to be more choice oriented. Like, not always. Obviously, we all have obligations of things that varying levels of, like, I actually committed to this.
I didn't get to choose to be a daughter. I was just born that way.
Yeah. But that's interesting because, like, memory is usually something you don't have a lot of control over. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, another example of the community taking control of something that isn't supposed to be like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there was a point in there. I just thought that was interesting.
No, it is very interesting to bring up. And I do think and it's not even a complaint actually about this book, but it's like my only thing that kind of like trips me up every time that I read it is that like speculative element of like, how do we get all of the memories into one human? And what about the loss of that human just releases those memories to be absorbed to the people around them? Like, it's a very weird, nebulous concept to me that I'm like, I just want to understand it, but I know I can't because it's not real and it doesn't actually matter. But I'm like, wow, that's so wild.
Yeah, especially because, like, the rest of the story, it feels very grounded. Like, it obviously is a very different setting than ours, thankfully. Although maybe not so distant, because obviously the way they deal with some issues is the same. But yeah, it's like that's kind of the only part that, like you said, feels more speculative.
Yeah, because everything else, even the very dystopian elements, are so practical, and even in a sense, like, we have things beyond that now.
Yeah.
hey, send in this paper. Like I could just be like, hey, Alexa, read me the Declaration of Independence, and she'd do it, you know, like,
yeah.
So it's weird that some things are beyond or behind in different senses.
Yeah.
But I think that does make a good dystopian novel, right? Like that's kind of the idea, is taking the elements of the real world and then putting them in this potential, this hypothetical world that could potentially be someday.
Yeah. And that like the part of the story that matters isn't the mechanics of it so much, it's the impact and like the themes, you know, like what it's saying. But yeah, another thought about the whole like memory concept and like what the book is doing with it is it's sort of like, I think one of the things it's saying is like memory is necessary. Like you can't get around that. Like even the community acknowledges that we can't just get rid of all these memories. We need to put them somewhere. And that's going to be one person who has like the worst job, but also maybe the best job. I don't know. Like, yeah. So memory is necessary. It's important. And also that is true on every scale. Like the idea, like collective memory is important because we see what happens when most people don't have that. And memory is also necessary for individuals because we see how important that is to Jonas's character arc and even to Gabriel. Yeah, so I think it's like that's one of the things that I guess I would sum it up as is like memory is necessary personally and more like community wide. Yet you can't ignore it, you can't get around it, you have to confront it and do something with it.
Yeah.
And also I think that memory, like you have to have, I don't know if I would say it this bluntly. I was going to say you have to have memory to have empathy. I don't know if it's as straightforward as that, but I think one of the reasons that humans have empathy and like we have this capacity to care about other people, you know, especially who are not like at all connected to us. One of the reasons that I think we have that is that we have an understanding of things that have happened before.
Yeah. Right.
So I guess that's kind of what I'm.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's like when, you know, people always say like we study history so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, right? It's like that big idea of like, if we don't acknowledge things that have happened in the world, how can we prevent them from happening again? Yeah. And I think she's so clear in this book that like the correct solution to, or not even solution, the correct course of action regarding pain is not to just be like, ooh, don't like it, don't acknowledge, because I think there's something so ominous about the scene where they talk about, well, I guess it's about Rosemary, but Jonas specifically remembers the little boy who fell in the river and drowned, and so they have the ceremony where they say his name and it gets quieter and quieter and quieter, and then they're like, okay, and he's gone from our community now. And also in the terms of like how they lost people, like because Rosemary's loss was one that was tragic, they just erased that whole name from existence. They're like, we can't name anyone else that. It's going to remind them of a sad thing. So it's gone now.
Yeah. And the way that I think for the ceremony with the little boy, they like did the quieter thing and then they like named a child, you know, so it's like
because it was just an accident. Yeah.
Would you say? I'm sorry.
You're right. Yeah, they were replacing him. I mean, literally, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this idea that like you can just like take out a person and put in another person and everything would be the same. Like that's not how people work. And that's not how relationships work.
I mean, genuinely, yeah. Oh, sorry. That's like so eerie and creepy to me imagining being a parent who tragically loses their child and they're like, it's okay, here's a different Caleb. I'd be like, sorry?
So
what?
Like, yeah. Like I know a family friend who like would always name her cat like the same thing. And I even feel like that's a little weird.
Yeah, that would,
like, because it's like sometimes they were like, she would adopt one who was like already named, and she would sort of just like start, yeah, I don't know, and it was like the name was like a nickname that you could use for other, so I don't know, it wasn't like they all had this very distinct name that she chose every time. It wasn't that distinct, but it was a little weird, and I always kind of thought of it as like, I mean, but that's like their own animal, you know, like
yeah.
you don't need to, like, it's not just like filling this one hole in your life
Yeah.
over and over.
Like at that point, you might as well call all of your cats Cat because you're like, come on, Cat, you're my new cat.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, it is really interesting. And there's something else I was going to say that we were just talking about. As if I haven't talked enough.
memory, about.
Oh, I think it was one of the things we were talking about before, where it's like the importance of memory is partly that I guess in a sort of practical ethical sense, where it's like you have to know what's at stake. I guess that's kind of how I would describe it, is you have to know what's at stake for humanity, you know, and like animals and, you know, like beings in general. Like you have to know what has happened or what could happen. But also in a more nebulous way, I think the book also shows that like we were talking about, memory in itself has value, even if you don't use it for something, even if it doesn't contribute to something, even if it doesn't teach you something. Knowing that something happened matters. And it's like almost hard to articulate why. And it kind of reminds me of like, so it's like sometimes in a TV show or like in a book or something, it's like there will be this like misunderstanding or this like this information that somebody knows and someone else doesn't. And I find it very distracting and frustrating if at the end of the story that's never cleared up. So that like this character never knows the truth of this thing that happened. And it doesn't affect the story. It doesn't like, you know, it's not like this huge thing that somebody should have told them because it matters a lot. It doesn't have to be that important. I don't like it when there is that like feeling of wrongness, you know, because it's like they don't know the truth. And even if it's not that important of a truth, you should still know it, you know? And I think that is sort of how I feel about like this very like nebulous concept of like memory just matters by itself. So
yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, for me, I'm like, absolutely what you're saying is true because excuse me, it's like every memory, even if it's small and seemingly irrelevant, does color interactions later in life or your perceptions of things, even because like, you know, if I remember a time, I'm trying to think, like just something so dumb, like remember a time when, I can't even think of an example that is relevant to what I'm trying to say. Whatever, a time a friend like told me something and that thing like isn't true and I never learned that it's not true, like I'm going to continue interacting with them as if that thing is true. And like maybe it would make more sense for me to not interact with them that way, but I would never know not to, because to me, I'm like, that's a real thing you told me. I don't know. It's just,
or as like another example. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I also don't know how to describe it.
It's like, I'm glad that you kind of get what I mean though, because it's like I feel like this is such a hard concept to like articulate. But like one of the other things is like, I think I've used this example when I was trying to explain to somebody basically this concept is like, no, sometimes it's like, it's just wrong not to know something, even if it's not like a big deal. I guess this is an example where it would be actually like an ethical like problem. But I was thinking it's like, if two people are together and one of them cheats on the other one, and this person is like truly very sorry about it, they think they made a horrible mistake, and they like work on themselves and their relation, basically they do everything right to like atone for it.
Mm-hmm.
But they never tell that person. I don't know, because it's like, on the one hand, yes, that is going to hurt them to hear that you like cheated on them, and it might affect if they can trust you again, but it still feels wrong that they don't have the choice. They don't have the full information. And even if it's like a slightly different example where it's like, you know, similar like setup, but maybe they do break up later, like that would still be weird that you don't know that. Like it still feels wrong.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is like even a better way. I'm like thinking out loud as I try to work through this. So maybe this is a better example of what I meant. It's like, if people are together, these two people are together, and then one of them cheats, like that in itself is wrong, even though the person doesn't know that it's happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that is like dishonest, and that is, I don't know, like obviously with cheating there's like other ethical concerns in addition to like the telling the truth or lying, but there are things where it's like the act of not knowing the truth, of not knowing something that happened, is in itself immoral, you know, or is bad. And I think that's like one of the things that The Giver does that is really interesting, where it's like, yeah, we see all of these like practical and emotional reasons why memory matters and how that feeds into like being empathetic and all of that. But I also get the sense, like you were saying, with the way that she writes those scenes of giving and receiving memory, it matters because it matters, you know? Like, I feel like my discussion points are getting less coherent as we go, but it matters because it matters.
Yeah. It's just, the significance is that you can have those memories, and then those shape your worldview.
Yeah.
Period.
Like it happened. Yeah. Zev says, you color and shape your life for you and not as a way to an end. Yeah. Yeah. That there doesn't have to be this purpose, which is kind of like what Jonas says about having a choice. He's like, it doesn't even matter, but I want to do it. I want to be able to do it. Like,
so. I know it's stupid to complain about what color tunic do I wear today, but it just matters that I can't actually have that choice, and I should be able to.
Yep. So on that note, I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Because I mean, the multi-part question is like, we kind of talked about a lot of it already with like, what does the book say about like love? Suffering and joy we talked about. I mean, I do think, like, I had put down deception as well. Like, what does the book say about deception? And I don't know if we had specific thoughts on that. It kind of came up in other things. Like, so I don't know, Julia, do you have?
Well, since you mentioned love, can I share a quote about love?
Please do.
Yeah, it's from the end of the book. So I might cry. It's when Jonas is working really hard to keep Gabriel warm as they're traveling. And I know. Actually, I have to read a little bit before what I actually marked just for the context, but he pressed his hands into Gabriel's back and tried to remember sunshine. For a moment, it seemed that nothing came to him, that his power was completely gone. Then it flickered suddenly, and he felt tiny tongues of heat begin to creep across and into his frozen feet and legs. He felt his face begin to glow and the tense, cold skin of his arms and hands relax. For a fleeting second, he felt that he wanted to keep it for himself, to let himself bathe in sunlight, unburdened by anything or anyone else. But the moment passed and was followed by an urge, a need, yearning, warmth with the one person left for him to love. Yeah, I know. Tell me about it, bud. Yeah.
I had forgotten that last part, the one person left for him to love.
Yeah. Lois! Anytime I get overwhelmed, I just have to yell at her for a second.
Yeah.
I know. We're both just like, well. Yeah.
It's been real.
We're just hunting for quotes now. Is that the move?
Yes.
Cool. I can do that. I want to get a good quote from The Giver. I love that man.
And even like right after the one that you just shared, where it says, for a moment they both were bathed in warmth and renewed strength as they stood hugging each other in the blinding snow. It's like Jonas gives that memory up, so he doesn't have it anymore, but it's still shared between them. And like,
oh boy.
even the like ones that almost every quote you could pull out and be like, that sums up the book.
I know.
Thinking about how he just wants to like lay down and sleep, you know? And it says, but he had come this far, he must try to go on. And I'm like, yeah, Jonas does.
He does. There's I love this line, and it's so, again, it's just like out of context. I feel like it feels different than in context, but I just love the way it's written. Actually, it's not even the full sentence. I just love the end of the sentence, but whatever. It's after Jonas gets the memory of the broken leg on the sled. I'm just literally going to give that one part of the sentence because I love it so much. But she writes, the giver led Jonas firmly, little by little, into the deep and terrible suffering of the past. That sentence, every time I read it, I'm like, oh, it hits me. I love that line.
And I think this one, it's the one of after he has the memory of war, and the giver just says, forgive me, and that's the end of the chapter. The very next paragraph, so the beginning of the next chapter, is Jonas did not want to go back. He didn't want the memories, didn't want the honor, didn't want the wisdom, didn't want the pain. He wanted his childhood again, his scraped knees and ball games. He sat in his dwelling alone, watching through the window, seeing children at play, citizens bicycling home from uneventful days at work, ordinary lives free of anguish, because he had been selected, as others before him had, to bear their burden.
Yep.
But the choice was not his. Which is interesting because this is a case where it was necessary for that choice to not be his, but like just that whole paragraph is like, yeah, I feel like I've been using the word empathy way too much, but like I don't know how else to describe it. Is like once you start paying attention to other people, other things, it's like you can't have a moment of like, wow, I was way happier when I didn't think about this. Like,
I think we haven't even talked about this. Sorry. I think one of the reasons, so I love this book, and I think I said while you were gone, Kara, that this is the book. No, maybe I said it before you were gone, that this is the book that I recommend to everyone. And I'm like, I don't care how old you are. If you haven't read The Giver yet, it's time to read The Giver. Like, but I think the reason that this book is so perfect for its middle grade demographic is how she both literally and figuratively ties all of this huge, big, important messaging also in with like puberty, like straight up.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so well crafted. I think it's brilliant because you get this whole arc of Jonas going from innocent to having wisdom and the pain of like that loss of innocence and what it means and how it shapes your life. But then also in the literal sense of like, you know, like he's having some spicy dreams, our little guy. And, you know, he's like, I don't feel comfortable sharing these. That's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, one of the, I don't know if I had a separate tab color for this. It was probably just part of other things, but one of the things that also stood out to me is like those little dehumanizing things that are like thrown in as an aside. Like, okay, for one thing, the number of times that various characters would be like, who's your favorite female? And I'm like, I hate this.
Yeah,
Like, we're supposed to. That's the point. But then also, there's the part where they're talking about numbers and how like the kids are given numbers based on how many are born in the year. And Jonas is thinking about how like, you know, they didn't really use them after that. Like everybody had names, but you know, occasionally if you were like correcting a child, you'd be like, that's enough, number 3. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Kind of gives
That,
you the chills.
yeah. And I think there was another thing like that I was thinking of. Yeah, I just found sometimes parents use them in irritation at a child's misbehavior, indicating that mischief made one unworthy of a name. Jonas always chuckled when he heard a parent, exasperated, call sharply to a whining toddler, "That's enough, number 3." Like, that is chilling.
Yep. I found another one of those lines where it's like, that's it. That's the whole book right there.
Yeah.
It goes back to your memory. But the giver himself says, the worst part of holding the memories is not the pain. It's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. Yeah.
Oops. One of the other random notes I wrote on a sticky note and just put it wherever. So it was like around the time when they're talking about how like honor is not the same thing as power, which great line, great comparison. But the other thing I wrote, which I'm like, good point, past Kara, is permission does not equal freedom. And I think that is one of I think that's one of the sort of corollaries to this thing we've been talking about, where it's like they make people feel like they have things like happiness and, you know, friends and permission, you know, freedom to do things, to choose things, but giving somebody permission to do something is not the same as them getting to make up their own mind. And like, that's not to say that there aren't cases where obviously you have to have rules about what you can and can't do, but in like this like larger community wide sense, it's not freedom for the kids to get away with like breaking the rule about bicycles.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm just literally perusing every single one of my tabs like, yeah.
Yep.
I just found the smack story and now I'm sad again.
Yeah. This is the chapter where Jonas watches his father kill the baby.
Yep. It's okay, but it's really, obviously that whole scene is hard to read, but for me, it's the moment in the scene after, where is it? Where he's crying, obviously, like, and he's saying, I won't go home. And the giver says, no one must hear you cry. Jonas looked up wildly. No one heard that little twin cry either. No one but my father. And he collapsed in sobs again. Hey, why would you write that? That's so sad. Lois, please. Give us a break.
Yeah. Yeah. And even oh my god, this is such a good scene. So this is when they're talking about, one of the many times when they're talking about like the capacity to choose and like, you know, upsides and downsides. So when he's saying, my little brother, he began and then corrected himself. No, that's inaccurate. He's not my brother. Not really. But this new child that my family takes care of, his name's Gabriel? Yes, I know about Gabriel. Well, he's right at the age where he's learning so much. He grabs toys when we hold them in front of him. My father says he's learning small muscle control, and he's really cute. The giver nodded. But now that I can see colors, at least sometimes, I was just thinking, what if we could hold up things that were bright red or bright yellow, and he could choose, instead of the sameness? He might make wrong choices. Oh, Jonas was silent for a minute. Oh, I see what you mean. It wouldn't matter for a new child's toy, but later it does matter, doesn't it? We don't dare to let people make choices of their own. Not safe, the giver suggested. Definitely not safe, Jonas said with certainty. What if they were allowed to choose their own mate and chose wrong? Or what if, he went on, almost laughing at the absurdity, they chose their own jobs? Frightening, isn't it? The giver said. Jonas chuckled. Very frightening. I can't even imagine it. We really have to protect people from wrong choices. It's safer. Yes, Jonas agreed. Much safer. But when the conversation turned to other things, Jonas was left, still, with a feeling of frustration that he didn't understand. Like, it's the way that Lois Lowry writes Jonas not even knowing what he's feeling, or like it feels wrong and he doesn't know why. It's just so good. It's just so good. And even like the paragraph right after that, he found that he was often angry now, irrationally angry at his group mates, that they were satisfied with their lives which had none of the vibrance his own was taking on. And he was angry at himself that he could not change that for them.
I have that one tabbed, that part after.
That's like the whole thing we were talking about, where it's like they don't even know that they're not happy. You know, like that they don't know that they don't have freedom.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Ooh. It's just, this book, it really gets me all jazzed up because, wow. It's like, why is it so short and so concise and so simple, but so all-encompassing and so important and so brilliant? Like, it's just the power this book has. Lois Lowry has me in a chokehold. She has had me since I was 9 years old. Okay, I could never say a bad word against this book.
Oh boy!
Like, if I could put 8 more of these Newbery medals on this cover, I would. Just
and it was so quick to read. Like you said, it's so short, and it's like I've been on like 4 emotional journeys. Like
yeah. It's such a fast read because it's so compelling and so again, like the precision and simplicity of the writing makes you just go like, okay, and obviously there's things just like the actual like formatting, like it's got quite a wide set font, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. Like, wow, I have been on an emotional roller coaster. I've cried 102 times, and also, what a great book.
I know. 10 out of 10 will cry again.
Yeah.
That wants to know if we have a Discord server. Okay. Thank you so much for being here and for your wonderful contributions in the comments.
Absolutely.
We don't have a Discord. We do have an Instagram that Julia keeps up, thankfully. Or no, I was thinking Past Classic.
Yeah, I was like, that's not this one.
I'm mixing up my book clubs. No, we don't have an official. I should think about doing that. We don't have an official like Discord for the non-genre book club.
Not a bad thought.
I will think about doing that then. Otherwise, it basically like updates and things happen on my channel, and I usually cross post them to Twitter, which in itself is like should probably have a backup for that. Yeah, so I will think about a Discord, but
are you not on Threads?
I am not.
Oh, no. Just get on Threads.
I know.
Same difference.
Yeah, really. Okay, so that wraps up
2 hours
later. 2-hour lecture on The Giver by Lois Lowry. Yes, thank you. We are going to be back in roughly a month for the second book, and we might be doing we haven't figured out the order, so it might end up being me hosting that one again, because I have been told that the main character embroiders, that she does like fiber arts, and I have a lot of emotions about that already. So yeah, we will be announcing that closer to. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us, who read along, or who just like hung out and listened. Thank you to everyone who watches this later. And yeah, we will see you again. Look forward to more crying. I can't wait.
Yay!
And don't forget, Julia is linked in the description, so give her a follow if you haven't already. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Oh,